Hi, Gergana. Thank you so much to joining us today, as we will talking more about the how our awareness campaign actually is not true, unmasking online gender-based violence myth on gender bias wins. So yes, like if you can just give us a brief description of yourself, your work, and why we ask you to be on board.
Thank you very much. Of course, thank you for having me here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And I would like to say that I'm following the progress of your project with great interest, and I'm looking forward to the next results of your efforts. And thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to tell a little bit about my project. So I'm a researcher hosted currently by the Ca Foscari University in Venice, and my project is supervised by Professor Sara De Vido. The project is a postdoctoral research initiative called SteREotyping, DiSInformation and Politicization, links between attacks against the Istanbul Convention and increased online gender-based violence. Since the title is rather long, I prefer the acronym, which is RESIST. As I said, it's European Union. It's financed under the European Union's Horizon 2020 program under a Marie Curie grant agreement. I would like to start by saying what are the aims of the project. Maybe like as it is clear from the title, the number one aim is to study the phenomenon of gender-based violence against women, and especially its digital dimension. So on one side, I explore the types of such violence, the forms that it might take. But on the other hand, I'm also exploring harmful narratives, disinformation narratives, stereotypes that may drive and fuel this type of violence. The second aim is also to explore the content of such misinformation and disinformation narratives and stories, as well as channels through which they spread. And thirdly, another important aim is based on the research to formulate policy recommendations to counter both gender-based violence, again, in the digital space as well, and gender disinformation. Maybe the next logical question would be, why is the project needed? Well, firstly, the reason I identified when I started writing it was that both gender-based violence, violence against women, and disinformation present serious threats to European societies, to European citizens, and also, let's face it, they cause serious emotional, physical, psychological harm to victims and to their relatives and friends. Secondly, we saw that the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we can all agree on this, that
totally.
It highlighted these risks and these threats. And in some countries, it coincided again with strong campaign against matters of public interest like public health, but also violence against women and domestic violence, which also spiked during the pandemic. And thirdly, maybe the third reason why I think the project is needed is that technological progress is great and we need it, but it also has led to a certain increase in online harassment, in online abuse. This is why it's important to study this phenomenon so that we can find solutions, find counter narratives, and so on. The project focuses. Yeah, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
The project focuses on 3 countries, and these are Bulgaria, Italy, and Lithuania. And I started by focusing on the Istanbul Convention as a major document, but in the course of my project, I also touch upon other documents that are related to both online violence in the digital realm, and disinformation. Just a few words about what the research would be based upon. During the first stage, I'm reviewing relevant documents, laws, policies, reports by governments, by agencies, NGOs, media, as well as 6 to 9 in-depth interviews with researchers, scholars working on the topics of the project. So disinformation, gender-based violence, domestic violence, and so on. Phase 2 will include 30-40 interviews in the 3 studied countries, so Bulgaria, Italy, and Lithuania, and they will and are involving, again, researchers, practitioners, policymakers, human rights advocates, journalists, and also some people from the tech sector. At the heart of phase 3 of the project will be summarizing the research findings and, based on the research findings, formulating policy recommendations, which I have already mentioned. The 3 key audiences of the project: firstly, the research community, scholars, again, working on the topics that we just mentioned. Secondly, students. And thirdly, policymakers and practitioners in the fields of human rights, women's rights, violence against women. And if you allow me just
Yes, of course.
3 last sentences about the project, I just want to share some maybe preliminary findings from my work so far.
Yes, please do.
It turns out that the Istanbul Convention, not surprisingly, but it's really identified by practitioners as quite a serious instrument, a robust instrument for supporting policy improvements. However, many experts say that more should be done in terms of prevention, and I think this is also something that is a key point also in your work and in your project, the importance of prevention. Secondly, criminalization of certain acts is really important. Later on, I will mention the much-awaited EU directive on combating violence against women. So this is definitely important, but it should also go hand in hand with prevention, with efforts to eradicate sexist stereotypes, structural inequalities that still exist in certain societies and communities. Thirdly, the third finding is that the anti-gender movement is rising in Europe, but in globally, and its messages are often spread, appropriated, let's say, by far-right and populist parties. Fourthly, the growth of gender-based violence and misinformation threaten, to a large extent, progress that has already been achieved in the last decades. Both researchers and practitioners agree that documents like the Istanbul Convention, the Digital Services Act, the new directive that I just mentioned, the AI Act, should be supported, but also their implementation should be closely monitored. And the last finding, probably again something which is quite logical and shared by most of the people I have interviewed so far, that even more cooperation is needed between the civil sector, state institutions, and the tech industry. It's not that it's not existing, it's there, it's working, but more cooperation wouldn't hurt when it comes to finding solutions to these problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even more like from our point of view, since we are focusing on the online aspect of it, a really huge part is collaborating with social media platforms, and it's true that the dialogue sometimes it's not so easy, and it should be more more fluent. Let's say that.
More fluent
Um,
and more regular as well, like continuous.
yes, yes, totally. Thank you so much, first of all, for this explanation, and the project seems super interesting and important. Like what we believe is that it's all very important. All the things we are doing it, even if it can be small, it can be big, but it's important. It's important to talk about it, And that's why we are doing these awareness campaigns. And this is also why we decided to start with the misconceptions about online gender-based violence, because whenever you start a dialogue about, especially online gender-based violence, there is always like a wall of misinformation, misconceptions that you really have to break it through before actually starting talking about it. And it's kind of crazy because as you said, the technology, it's here, it's everywhere. We are always connected. We are always on social media platforms. We are always truly witnessing actual gender-based violence, but sometimes, a lot of times, people don't understand what it
Mm.
is. So it's truly, we really think that it's truly important to start from the stereotypes, from the myth, and we have
Mm.
to debunk them. So my question would be like, which are for you like the most, I think, dangerous misconceptions about online gender-based violence in general, but of course more specifically on the online cyberspace. And yes, which are the ones you think are more dangerous?
Yeah, thank you for the question. At the beginning, I would like to say that, of course, my contribution is based on specific documents, research, and reports, which I will be happy to share afterwards if needed as sources.
Of course.
I would even like directly quote from several documents because I think this is important. I would say that the misconceptions, they just prevent us from seeing where the problem is. I mean, maybe they're not very dangerous, but they're just limiting us to see where the problem is and coin solutions. For me, still personally, the first misconception, although things are starting to improve, I think, in the last year or so, is that this idea that offline and online is separate. These are two completely separate phenomena. And this is not the case. And this has been made very clear by Grevio. Just a little context, Grevio is the group of experts on action against violence against women and domestic violence under the framework of the Council of Europe and the convention, the Istanbul Convention. This is the name we use to refer to it. So basically, Council of Europe empowers Grevio to adopt general recommendations on the implementation of the convention, and it's quite telling that, according to me, that the first recommendation was based on the digital dimension of violence against women. So importantly, Grevio stresses that violence in the digital realm is a distinct but not separate form of violence. And I would like to quote just the two sections of the document itself. So the first quote, the different forms of violence against women and domestic violence occurring in the digital sphere and those occurring in the physical world are not mutually exclusive and frequently overlap with one another, end quote. And then the second quote, digital experiences of violence may be an extension of or a precursor to physical and sexual violence, stalking, and harassment, end quote. And also the recommendations that Grevio outlines and offers to states on how they can combat violence against women in the digital realm. Actually, a group using the original four pillars of the convention, prevention, protection, prosecution, and coordinated policy. And I believe this strongly supports the view that the violence in the digital world is not separate. These two types of violence are strongly interlinked.
And the effect, sorry, I was thinking, and the effect, like a lot of people think that it's less hurtful, it's less impacting just because it happened on Instagram, and it's not. It's actually not, because the repercussions are in your real life. So yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. In fact, the second misconception or misunderstanding is related to what you're saying. But again, I think I see improvement. I don't know. I think I wasn't optimistic 1 year ago. I don't know what changed, but I just see that there is a lot of literature, a lot of reports, not only by academia, which is very important, but this idea that it's not as harmful. I mean, we know it's not like that. It can cause not only psychological and emotional harm, it could also cause physical harm to people. It could lead to self-harm. It could lead in very drastic situations, very extreme cases, to suicide. It causes feelings like fear, anxiety, self-doubt, frustration. And it's not only about, I mean, we will talk about, of course, online hate speech and online gender abuse, but there are also other types of violence that have repercussions for people. For instance, online economic violence, limiting access of the victim to their bank account or to their funds, or creating AI content that is offensive, harmful, and so on. So this can have a profound impact on people. And I just mentioned the other misconceptions I identified. No, because actually they are related also they are related to your empirical study, which we published, and I think that the authors of the study touch upon one of these misconceptions, and it's namely that online abuse exists only because we have the internet and we have the technologies. Again, this is something that it's just incorrect, but I see that the mentality around it is changing. So we need to understand that, yes, it's true. Technology provides the medium for abuse sometimes. Tech companies should do more, should put more effort into limiting such acts, probably. But we have to also think about the fact that violence in the digital realm occurs because of the existence of these stereotypes, which are pervasive. They are related to stereotypical roles for women, men, some maybe patriarchal ideas about masculinity and femininity. So yes, technology and internet exists, but the underlying cause, I think you mentioned it clearly in the report, it's the human behind the screen. And the third misconception is that there is nothing we can do about it. Actually, we can. Yes, it's difficult, it's hard, but we can do something. We can, I'm not talking about prevention programs, that's a must, that's a set, but beyond prevention programs, we can just report when we see it online. We can try. Using all the reporting mechanisms and tools we have, we can even report it to law enforcement, and we can collect as much evidence as possible. For example, taking screenshots, taking photos, and so on. And we can also turn to our colleagues and friends, to helplines, to teachers, to parents. So we should be able to do something about it, and we can. So, as I said, these are the misconceptions I had identified. I would like to stress that I hope that I'm not too optimistic, but I definitely see some improvement and some changes when it comes to these misconceptions, and I attribute it to the fact that a lot of important work is being currently done to tackle gender-based violence.
As we are talking about, you just say that we will talk about all the forms of touch facilitated, let's call like this, gender-based violence. We can just talk more about that because I think that it is still needed to be precise and still do like a list of things, because it's really like a cloud of things, and people maybe are not super they really don't understand the different forms, which, by the way, will be our second awareness campaign. A little of spoiler, but we really think it's important to highlight how many forms they are and how different they are, and the effect they have, because it's not all the same. It's not just trolling, it's not just revenge. It's way more, and there are a lot of. So I will give you the floor to explain to us maybe the main forms of.
I would say that probably one of the most pervasive types, although, I mean, this is not based on statistical information, it's online gendered hate speech and hate speech in general. So this is speech that is hateful towards persons because of different characteristics. It might be gender, it might be religion, it might be sexual orientation, and it spreads quite quickly online. But this is true for all types of violence that circulate in the cyberspace. And I think it's also connected to something which has been identified not recently, but let's say in the last few years as a serious problem: the online gender-based misinformation and disinformation. We already have many scholars and researchers and practitioners working on the topic. Basically, this is manipulative, offensive, false information that targets women because of their gender, because they're women. And it also frequently targets women in prominent positions, such as political figures, journalists, human rights activists. Again, there are many in the last years. There are many reports on this phenomenon. Cyber trolling. Again, I think it's a related phenomenon, which entails sending offensive emails or social media posts. And again, very often the target are women who are somehow prominent. It might be, singers and actresses and so on. So it's also quite common. And sometimes all these things that we talked about, gendered hate speech, gendered misinformation, cyber trolling, they might also involve threats, death threats of bodily injury, rape, and so on.
Yes, it's always um, I don't want to use the term scary, but it's often that. Like it is true that a lot of times you have to think before posting something, like putting yourself out there. It, it is so wrong that you can, and you might have some repercussions like this. And yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
what you said made me think about three other forms, which are, especially one of them is quite well researched, I should say, doxing. So
Yes.
doxing refers to this deliberate sharing of information about somebody, personal information, their address, their work, so that this person can become a target of abuse, harassment, and so on. And the other probably is extortion, online extortion, using material you have that is related to a person to basically asking for money, or even for sexual favors, and so on. So yeah, it's very important how we share our information, where we share it, and with whom, because um, sexual trafficking. Sexual traffickers increasingly use, the cyberspace in order to groom and attract their victims, seek their victims.
Yes, and there is also the image-based sexual abuse, and a lot of other things. And like I think that arriving at this point of conversation, you can easily think like, okay, I will just not post anything on social media. I will just not use social media, not be on the cyberspace. But we know that is not right. We know that everyone should be free and should be welcomed in all the cyberspace and on the social medias. And of course, we have to prepare people and especially young people. menABLE, it's solely focused on young people because we really believe that it's our main target. Um, so it's important to let young people understand the dangers of this of the website, even though they kind of were born to it. So like they think they know everything and they think that they can really surf it. but but it's also important to just remind the people that they can be online, they can have a presence online, they can share their content, and any that is the prevention we want to do to make the safer a safer internet space. So my question is like if you think there are some guidelines or some yeah, like even exercises that young people can do to feel more secure online and be there without really having any fears.
As you said, it's really important. Staying offline is not a solution. Firstly, because this doesn't eliminate the problem, and secondly, because it silences people. And again, this shouldn't be this. I mean, this is not necessarily like famous people or people in visible positions. All all people should have access to digital technologies. We should be able to be online. Of course, some prefer to spend less time online, others prefer to spend that. That's perfectly fine. But nobody should be thrown out of this space because of abuse and violence. By the way, again, referring to your report, because I literally read it 2 weeks ago, a week ago, it's that sometimes when it comes to involving young men and boys, especially young men, let's say teenagers, these cultures about the locker room talk, about how this is funny, how this is not something. And I believe I read that you mentioned that also girls sometimes have this mentality, oh, this is only online, this is a prank, this is funny,
Yes,
everybody
yes.
does it.
It's our
Mm,
group chat on Instagram. Nobody's gonna read it, but it's not. Yeah.
exactly. So I would say that really maybe it's the two pillars of all activities. I just want to stress that I don't have experience immediately working with young people in a school setting or outside it, but would be this prevention in the sense of identifying that this is a dangerous behavior, this is harmful behavior, it harms people, centering on values, because there is a lot of talk about traditional values today
Mm.
with respect to different topics. But um, it's up to us. To decide which our traditional values are. The values of respect, tolerance, not wanting to hurt anybody. I think these are equally important. And also maybe this should go hand in hand with some training about the importance of gender equality, gender justice, that the women's roles should not be stereotypical, that women have a place in all spheres of life, including STEM, by the way, the STEM
Mm-hmm.
sector. This is something that's often quite discussed, in the sense that maybe some of the solutions that are currently, let's say, on the market on how to deal with gender-based violence online could benefit from more women in the sector and from including women in the search for these solutions.
Yes, and it's like we did a circle because we can start from the beginning and saying that even this is not only online, it's offline too. If we do something maybe in school or maybe just give more women more spaces in those sectors, it, it it's gonna translate in the online world as well. So yeah.
By the way, just another thought I wanted to share, and it's actually straight from a recent report. It just it really spoke to me. The report is called. It was published in 2023, and it's called "Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence as an Attack on Women's Public Participation: A Review of Global Evidence and Implications." And one of the problematic points that the authors of the report identify is that this type of violence, to quote directly from the report, is still not seen as everyone's responsibility. So they say that they found that the majority of the organizations working on these types of violence are founded by women or work with women. Thus, they say, the authors say, again, the burden on countering this type of violence falls on those who experience it the most. So this comes back, to also the idea of having more women in the STEM sector. And something else that this problem identified, but we kind of touched upon it already, is that as the report says, we are talking about, quote, human problem propelled by technology. Yeah. I think that speaks quite well.
Yes, it's really all that, and even the role of boys. Our project is called menABLE for this, because our main focus it's really on young boys and men to let be like a part of the solution. And because it's also I'm also thinking that it's a stereotype as well, thinking that they are just the perpetrators. It's important also to stress the fact that they can be actual helpers. They can be in our help. And again, it's all a thing that it should start from the schools, from the social sector in general, and so they can it can go to the online sphere.
Yes, definitely. And maybe just to add something, I think I read it in another study, but I cannot, at the moment, I cannot remember the author, but I will look for it, is that all these programs that involve men, programs, trainings, courses, activities, you name it, different names, should avoid shaming. Should avoid shaming boys. So boys should not go into this training knowing they're bad, knowing they're perpetrators. The training should be based on inclusivity, positive emotions, and so on. This understanding, trust. That's what I'm saying. Values and principles, they're different.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Okay. I think that we discussed all our points. Tell me if you want to stress some other points. We have time.
I just wanted, it's impossible, it's impossible to cover all possible measures.
Yes.
On one hand, it's nice that people keep proposing new measures and new actions. A couple of times I mentioned the EU directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence, which is to be voted in the coming days. We don't have the final text, but based on the drafts, I hope that most of the recommendations will remain. I just wanted to highlight a few measures that struck me as particularly well formulated. That doesn't mean that all the measures are not quite sound and well formulated, but I think these are related to what we've been talking about. Firstly, the role of men and boys, and secondly, this online dimension, this digital dimension. One of the recommendations is that specialist support services, I quote again from the last version I saw, specialist support services should include information on how to document the acts that happen online, about how victims can also look for remedies, although it's not violence in the physical world. The directive also talks about preventive measures a lot. It mentions targeted awareness raising campaigns or programs from the earliest ages, which increase the understanding among the general public of the different manifestations and root causes of violence against women. And something that we also touched upon, again, doing everything possible to prevent secondary victimization, to prevent victim blaming, with respect to both online and offline violence.
Yes, it's crucial. It's way more than important. It's really crucial to have it, and let's hope for the best. Yes, I think I think we can close. I want to thank you again for really being here, for being so so helpful, and your knowledge is truly amazing. We are really happy to have you here.
I just say, yeah, thank you again
No.
for the opportunity to share my opinion, to present my project. And I would like really to stress that it's quite, inspiring, maybe, despite the fact that phenomena like this it still exist. It's very inspiring to see that this issue is getting an attention from all kind of people and groups. And I really look forward to the results of your project. And yeah, I hope we will try to improve the digital world somehow.
Let's make the digital space a safer place.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.